Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
Whenever laws get passed, you got to look at them and ask, is this law fair? Is this law constitutional? And anytime you see a law that says, well, this law only applies to this group but not that group, then you start going, oh, let's take a closer look at that. And I got a note yesterday from the IJ, Institute for Justice. Philip Suderman sent it to me. Court halts Jacksonville, North Carolina's food truck sign restrictions. So Jacksonville, North Carolina had some restrictions on signs that only applied to food trucks. And you got to ask yourself, why do we have a law that applies only to food trucks? So Jacksonville food truck operators have won a critical legal victory in their challenge to rules that have made it difficult for them to operate in much of the city. In a ruling from the bench the other day, the County Superior Court granted plaintiff's motion for a preliminary injunction against the signage restrictions that Jacksonville, North Carolina only imposes on food trucks. As a result, the injunction, the plaintiff food truck owners will no longer need to follow the city's food truck signage restrictions for the remainder of the lawsuit and can instead follow Jacksonville's general sign code. So they have a code regarding signs, business signs, and then a special subsection for food trucks. This will allow the food trucks to use 15-foot so-called feathered signs due to their feather-like appearance, as well as electronic signs on the sides of their trucks. Both of these are commonly used by food trucks in other towns, as well as by countless other businesses in Jacksonville. It's just that if you were a food truck, you couldn't use them. Before the injunction, food trucks were limited to one 5-foot by 5-foot A-frame sign, which must be within 20 feet of the truck. And food trucks were not allowed to use electronic signage, because that would be crazy. The ruling comes as part of a years-long legal effort filed by the Institute for Justice on behalf of Nicole Gonzalez, who seeks to host food trucks on her property, and food truck operators Tony Proctor and Ray Raymond. Under Jacksonville's burdensome zoning rules, food trucks were effectively banned in over 96% of the city. After the district court dismissed the lawsuit, the trucks and property owners appealed, and the North Carolina Court of Appeals agreed with plaintiffs that all of their claims should proceed. The government is not allowed to restrict speech just because the officials do not want food trucks to compete with their friends' restaurants, which, of course, is what everybody thinks is going on here. That's the attorney for the IJ, Robert Fellner, speaking. These laws don't just hurt food truck owners. They also make Jacksonville's roads more dangerous by making it harder for drivers to find what they are looking for. Sign codes can make or break a business, says the plaintiff. This injunction will be a huge help, but there's still work to be done, and I look forward to working with the Institute for Justice to see the rest of this case through. By the way, I ate at a food truck yesterday. I'm not making this up. One of my brothers is in a band, and they play outdoor concerts all over the place in the summertime. And they played one yesterday in Royal Oak, Michigan. And there's a parking lot, and they set up a stage, and there's a band playing, and there's a farmer's market, and there's a whole bunch of food trucks. All kinds of food trucks parked around there. Had some really, really good barbecue. But it's not the government's job to pick winners and losers in the marketplace. That choice belongs to consumers, said IJ Senior Attorney Justin Pearson. That becomes doubly true when the government tries to decide who is allowed to speak. And we've talked about a couple other cases done by the Institute regarding speech and signs. You'll recall there's the case about the business that had a big mural of donuts on it. Donuts. And the city said they couldn't have that because it was advertising that didn't fit their advertising rules for whatever reason. And it's so hard to ask yourself and come up with an answer that makes sense. How do we define a mural versus a sign versus, and by the way, if it's speech, there's that pesky little thing called the First Amendment. But what's interesting like this, what I said earlier, is when you're reading a statute and there's a carve out and it says, but here's a rule for this specific group. And here the group is food trucks. You got to ask yourself, why do they have these special rules just for food trucks? And it makes you wonder. And as somebody pointed out, it could be because their friends own restaurants, but so hard to prove these things. But I've mentioned many times before that the Institute for Justice does cases like this where they'll get involved and they tend to look for constitutional issues that affect a lot of people. And so when they're talking about food truck signs, you might go, Steve, that's not a lot of people. How many people own food trucks in Jacksonville, North Carolina, or are going to be bringing food trucks in? Well, interestingly, this kind of statute has popped up elsewhere. And so by stepping on it here, hopefully they can discourage other city councils from going, hey, my buddy's got a restaurant and he hates food trucks. Maybe we should pass a sign ordinance. And so that could be it. But free speech issues are huge with them. So the Institute for Justice is a public interest law firm with a mission to protect individuals' constitutional rights. And in the past, they've stood up for the rights of food truck owners to earn an honest living all over the country by defeating similar ordinances to this one that limit where food trucks may operate. Nearby, for instance, in Carolina Beach, IJ's lawsuit led town officials to repeal an unconstitutional law which required food truck owners to also own a brick and mortar store. You can only own a food truck if you also own an actual restaurant. In Fort Pierce, Florida, IJ helped defeat a law that banned food trucks within 500 feet of an established restaurant. So, for instance, I'm trying to think now. I believe there was a restaurant within 500 feet of the food trucks I saw yesterday. I'm pretty certain there was, because real close, let's put it that way. And of course, the food trucks aren't there 365 days a year. They're just there for that one event. And in Louisville, IJ beat a law that blocked food trucks from serving within 150 feet of any establishment that serves food. So they're basically saying there, hey, look, there's a monopoly on food. We're going to give this restaurant, and they're going to have a buffer zone around this little area here. And that buffer zone is theirs. It's theirs. Are they serving food out there? No. You got to go inside and eat. What if I don't want to eat what they've got, but I want to eat something from a food truck? Well, the food truck can just be down the street a ways, a little further. Start walking. And it's one of those things. It doesn't sound like this is the fight of the century to many people. But if you operate a food truck, yeah. So it's a good win. So I've mentioned before that the Institute for Justice is a nonprofit that operates entirely based on generosity of its supporters. And I support them. And I encourage my audience members to support them. You can simply follow them on YouTube. They've got a YouTube channel. You can also just bookmark their page and follow them there. But you can also sign up for their free newsletter. And they'll send you emails like this one, but they also have a very, very nice magazine they send out, the old, analog paper magazine. And you see the kinds of cases they handle. Because, it's true that with the internet, we have a broader scope of what we can actually observe to some degree, and we might hear about things outside of our own little area more than we did in the old days. But when you read the stuff on their page at ij.org, you're going to see stories and legal cases and go, wow, somebody actually passed a law that said that. And sadly, if somebody walked into an attorney's office in North Carolina and said, hey, I want to fight the city ordinance on food trucks, I want to hire you to do that, it's going to cost a lot of money. And as you would have gathered by listening to the story, they filed the lawsuit and the court threw it out. They had to take it up on appeal. And on appeal, they won. And unfortunately, the legal process is expensive. And the average person couldn't afford to do that. But the Institute for Justice got involved, they handled it, they took it on, and they did it because they're trying to create good law. And they're trying to create good law that will eventually spread, and also the opposite, and that is they're trying to prevent bad law. And so if they see a bad law like this and they get it struck down, boom, it's a win for everybody. And I don't own a food truck, but I'm glad this happened. So thank you very much, guys, at the Institute for Justice, where the court halts Jacksonville, North Carolina's food truck sign restrictions. And that, again, is from the press release, Philip Suderman at the IJ.org. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law.
Where there's a will, I want to be in it.